You're about to step into a mystery where science meets the unknown. Imagine a city at night, seen from far above. A lattice of lights flickering in patterns. Traffic flowing like charge through a circuit. Weather seeding clouds as if from a random number generator. Now pull farther back until the city shrinks to a pixel, the planet to a sphere, and the cosmos itself looks almost computational. Fields and particles evolving by rules so consistent they could be written as code. If reality behaves like a program, it becomes tempting to ask whether it might be one. What if the fabric of space and time is not a fabric at all, but a vast, humming computation? Quantum bits entangled into a kind of cosmic processor. And if you'd like to help me bring more of these mysteries to life, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Tonight we explore the simulation hypothesis. Not the familiar video game metaphor, but a deeper question at the crossroads of physics, philosophy, and information. Are we living inside a digital universe built on quantum computation? And if not, why does the idea feel so close to truths physics already hints at? The instinct to doubt the given world is ancient. Plato's prisoners mistake shadows for reality. Descartes worries an evil intellect feeds him illusions. Modern thought experiments swap demons for vats and neural wires. These are epistemic alarms. Can we trust appearances? But the contemporary simulation hypothesis adds a technological pivot. If intelligent beings can build convincing virtual worlds populated by sentient agents, then perhaps we are those agents. In the early 2000s, this was sharpened into a trilemma. Either civilizations like ours almost never reach the capacity to run ancestor-scale simulations, or they reach it, but choose not to run many, or they do run many, in which case simulated minds vastly outnumber base-level minds, and we should update our expectations accordingly. It is not proof. It is a probability puzzle with unsettling implications. Physics complicates and enriches the question. Long before consumer graphics cards, a different reason to think in computational terms appeared. The only efficient way to model quantum systems is with quantum computation. Classical computers drown in exponential complexity. Quantum devices, by harnessing superposition and interference, tame that complexity in native currency. One of the founding insights of quantum information science was that the world does not just allow computation. The world is built from the same substrate computation uses states, transformations, measurements, and entropy. Information here is not gossip or data on a drive. It is the account of what can, in principle, be known and transformed without contradiction. The laws of physics look like constraints on information processing. No cloning. No faster-than-light signaling. Unitary evolution that preserves probabilities. When we rephrase field theories in terms of qubits and channels, or thermodynamics in terms of bits and erasure costs, reality starts to read like a protocol. Even space-time seems to whisper in the grammar of information. Black holes, once thought to be featureless dead ends, turned out to carry entropy proportional not to their volume, but to the area of their horizons. That scaling hints that the information content of a region is encoded on its boundary, a principle that later blossomed into holography. Under certain conditions, a gravitational universe in a bulk volume is equivalent to a non-gravitational quantum system living on its boundary. The mathematics is specific and technical, but its moral is broad. Volumes can be dual to surfaces. Geometry can be dual to entanglement. in toy models that physicists play with to learn quantum gravity. The interior of a space is reconstructed from patterns of quantum entanglement on the boundary, using structures that look strikingly like error-correcting codes. These are not simulations. They are equivalences. But if gravity leans so heavily on which qubits are entangled with which, then it is natural, if dangerous, to think of the universe as a quantum computation whose geometry is the shadow of information-theoretic relationships.
If you want to imagine what quantum computation means beneath slogans, picture a register of qubits as coins that can be both heads and tails until you look. That sentence is wrong and right at once. Qubits are not fuzzy coins. They are vectors in a complex space that let amplitudes add and cancel, producing interference patterns and probability. Entanglement is stranger. Correlation so tight that describing the whole is cheaper than describing the parts. Measurement of one system updates your description of its partner instantly, without sending a signal. The classical world emerges not because qubits stop being quantum, but because interactions with the environment, which is just the rest of the universe, destroy delicate interference and leave robust records, a process called decoherence. Theories of quantum error correction show how to hide fragile information across many degrees of freedom so that local pokes don't kill it. Exactly the trick needed if spacetime or fields are to stay stable against the noise of the cosmos. Everywhere we look, the deep structure of nature seems to be this: states, transformations, codes, constraints. That is precisely why the simulation hypothesis feels plausible. We are already describing the world as if it were an algorithm running on unfamiliar hardware. But we need to separate flavors of the idea. One flavor says we are literally inside a computer built by beings above us. Another says that the universe is isomorphic to a computation. No outside programmer required. The second is closer to how physicists actually use computational metaphors. A trajectory of the universe under physical law is a computation of what happens next. That is not controversial. The first flavor, the literal simulated reality, adds contingencies. A base reality with limited resources, design choices, and bugs. Can physics test those contingencies? A popular proposal is to look for resource limits, signatures of an underlying grid. If a superior civilization discretized space on a lattice to run the world, two high-energy particles might betray preferred directions or maximum momenta, because a lattice breaks the perfect rotational symmetries of a continuum. Some studies have explored whether ultra-high-energy cosmic rays or neutrinos display tiny anisotropies or cutoffs consistent with a coarse-grained spacetime. So far, the universe keeps its poker face. Observed behaviors are consistent with continuous symmetries, down to scales we can probe. Another idea is to search for failures of randomness. If the cosmos used a pseudo-random number generator, maybe we'd catch repetition or biases. But quantum randomness has been verified to punishing standards in experiments where measurement settings are chosen by distant quasars or cosmic microwave background photons, and where loopholes are closed with care. Yet these ideas face a deeper problem. Any test that we can think of can be passed by a simulator sophisticated enough to predict and avoid our tests. In that sense, the simulation hypothesis, as an empirical claim about being inside someone else's computer, is slippery. It can retreat faster than evidence can advance. A more promising way to engage is to treat the hypothesis as a modeling challenge. Could a quantum computational simulation reproduce a universe like ours with plausible resources? That depends on the granularity of what needs to be simulated. Rendering the wave function of every particle in the visible universe with exact fidelity is beyond absurd. You would need a universe-sized computer built inside something larger. But perhaps a simulator would only compute the relevant amplitudes where and when needed. Lazy evaluation at cosmic scale. This sounds like the way video games render only what the player sees. And some like to draw a line from that to the quantum measurement problem. The world renders definite outcomes when observed. It's a playful metaphor. It's also misleading. Quantum theory never says things are undefined until we look. It says the description appropriate for predicting outcomes looks different when systems become entangled with measuring devices. Decoherence explains the transition from many possible interference patterns to the robust classical records all observers agree on. No cosmic graphics card is required. Even if lazy evaluation were somehow permissible, the computational cost of faithful quantum dynamics is ferocious. Error correction to keep a quantum computation coherent scales steeply. Simulating continuous quantum fields with cutoffs quickly eats memory. And if space-time itself emerges from entanglement patterns, you must simulate the code that builds the very stage on which your particles dance. Advocates of digital physics point out that the universe has performed a finite number of logical operations since the Big Bang, an enormous number, but finite, and that the energy and entropy available bound what is computable. That observation humbles us. Our universe is not a boundless analog slate. It has a computational budget baked into thermodynamics. But the budget belongs to the universe itself, not to an external server rack, unless we assume one. When we weigh alternative pictures of reality, we should list their costs and benefits. The literal simulation hypothesis buys explanatory punch for the fine-tuning of constants. Perhaps our cosmos is one of many runs with parameters set to yield long-lived structures. But so do other frameworks, from inflationary multiverses to selection effects in a vast landscape of vacua. Simulation also raises regress problems. Who simulates the simulators and so on? Some say the chain can ground out in a base reality. Others say it doesn't matter. Ethically, it muddies waters. If suffering is simulated, is it less real? If our choices are observed by higher level beings, does that change what we owe each other? In a perverse twist, some worry that proving we are in a simulation could prompt our overseers to shut us down. The way developers kill a process that becomes self-aware. That fear confuses plot with policy. A benevolent programmer could applaud curiosity as a feature, not a bug. Still, the fact that the hypothesis dovetails so neatly with narrative instincts, plots, reveals, watchers, should make us extra careful. Physics is allergic to stories that protect themselves from disconfirmation. There are gentler, scientifically fecund versions of the thesis. One says that whether or not we live in a simulation, the best language we have for fundamental reality is computation. In this view, the universe computes its own future by local updates under universal laws. Quantum theory is the operating system. Entanglement is the data structure for geometry. Error correction is the mechanism that stabilizes spacetime. And complexity, the difficulty of reaching one state from another under simple gates, relates to gravitational quantities like the volume behind black hole horizons. In toy models, indeed, the growth of computational complexity mirrors the growth of wormholes, decoding Hawking radiation maps onto inverting an exponentially hard scrambling circuit. These aren't gimmicks. They are clues that information is not a veneer on physics, but its grammar. If so, then we're living in a computation is true in the same way. We are living in a geometry is true. There is no programmer above. There is a lawfulness within. Another version says that even if physics is continuous at bedrock, the effective description relevant to observers like us is digital in crucial ways. Measurements yield discrete outcomes. Conserved charges come in quanta. Classical records are robust, copyable bits. The universe's capacity to store distinct states is finite in any finite region because entropy bounds them. On this view, digital and analog are not warring metaphors, but complementary layers. The simulation hypothesis becomes less of a claim about cages and more of a reminder that information is real, conserved, and expensive. What about the practical fringe? The idea of sending a message upward to the simulators, or finding their comments in the constants. People have proposed encoding a greeting in prime numbers or in the cosmic microwave background statistical flukes. Others joke that the fine structure constants' uncanny appearances feel like signatures. These are clever, human ideas. They also presume that the simulators share our taste for Easter eggs, and that the physics they implement would let such signatures survive inflation, chaotic dynamics, and billions of years of noise. If someone wanted to talk, they could choose easier channels. If they don't, we should not invent conversations.
Perhaps the most constructive way to live with the hypothesis is to let it sharpen our ethics and widen our wonder without hijacking our judgment. If we are simulated, then our consciousness is an implemented process. But we already believe that our minds are processes running on wet neural hardware. And we already agreed that suffering and joy are real regardless of substrate. If someone is watching, that does not absolve us of responsibility or diminish the beauty of our projects. If anything, it adds an audience. If no one is watching, we are still the only hands the universe has to make meaning with. Either way, the moral math is the same: reduce harm, increase understanding, build worlds worth inhabiting. The deepest philosophical effect of the simulation hypothesis is to recenter humility. It reminds us that a model is not the thing, that what we call laws might themselves be emergent regularities, that our place in a hierarchy of descriptions is uncertain. It also, paradoxically, affirms a kind of confidence. If physics is an information theory at heart, then every time we compress a phenomenon into an algorithm or an experiment into a protocol, we are speaking nature's native language. The astonishing success of this language, its ability to predict exoplanet spectra, knit quantum devices, and weigh black holes from ripples in spacetime, suggests that even if reality is a computation, it is a fair one. It lets us learn its rules by playing. So where does that leave the headline question? Are we living inside a digital universe built on quantum computation? If digital means that information comes in discrete, conserved chunks and that complexity and error correction rule structure at many scales, then yes, that description tracks powerful, well-tested trends. If it means that we inhabit a video game coded by beings who occasionally patch reality, physics offers no knockdown evidence and some reasons for caution, not least that such a claim is designed to dodge refutation. The safest, and perhaps most interesting position, is to treat the hypothesis as a lens rather than a verdict. Through it, we notice that computation is not optional in physics. It is constitutive. Through it, we see that quantum theory's weirdness is not a bug to be ironed out. but a feature that may build spacetime itself. Through it, we remember that meaning is something we project onto patterns that are, in the strictest sense, calculations. As our camera lifts away from the city of lights and the grid blurs into darkness, hold one last image. A child learns to program by building a little world where rules become visible. Gravity, friction, a light that turns red and then green. The point is not that our universe is such a toy. The point is that our species has, with painful effort, learned to write tiny pieces of code that nature will run. Equations that predict, circuits that compute, instruments that record. If there is a programmer above, we are apprentices worth keeping. If there isn't, we are still authors in a cosmos that lets authorship exist. So here's my question for you, and I hope you'll wrestle with it in the comments. If reality really is best described as an immense quantum computation, what should we build next to honor that truth? A better detector? A better theory? A better ethic? And how would you know that your choice wasn't just another beautiful story the universe is willing to compute?